Hello, I'm Richard Knowles, and I welcome you to Module 7 of this course, Leading and Using the Process Enneagram. This is a bonus module for those of you who want to go deeper. In this module, I'll discuss the nature of the points and the lines in the Process Enneagram figure. It's important for leaders and facilitators to understand these in order to maintain the integrity of the whole process of using the Process Enneagram effectively. This work comes from the teachings of John Bennett, a British scientist, philosopher, and industrialist. He was seeking understanding beyond just knowing and acting. He was searching for universal regularities, which are modes of connectedness. We're connected in ways that he called systems, and the study of these systems he called systematics. The system is a set of distinct but mutually relevant terms, like ideas or things or relationships. We perceive, think, and act through these distinctness and the mutual relevance of the objects and the ideas. Systematics is the study of systems and their application to the problem of understanding ourselves and the world. The number of the terms 1, 2, 3, 4, monad or dyad gives its order and its attribute, and you'll see that as we move through these terms, they become more and more complex. The first thing I want to show you is the Enneagram figure itself, just as a reminder of where we are and where we're starting. We have a simple figure with 9 points arranged around it, and lines within that connecting the points in different ways. And that's what we started with. And the idea that we had was, what happens if we take Bennett's systems and place them around the Enneagram? And will that give us insights on how to use it and develop an understanding of this tool? Because up to this point, as we were studying it, it was not very useful, and we didn't really know what to do with it. So the first term that Bennett talks about is the monad. It's a one-term system. It's the nature of wholeness. What is it we're talking about? What are we looking at? What's inside the circle? What's outside the circle? And what is the edge? So it brings focus and agreement onto the subject and the topic about which we're going to talk about and explore as we use the Process Enneagram. And I called that the intention. That's what we're about. The next term to look at is the dyad. As we begin to look at our intention, we begin to find that there are polarities. There are either-or situations developing. Do we have enough money to be able to do the job safely? What about cost and quality? In our relationships, what happens between male and female? How do we work all these things out, these differences? And I call this the issues and ambiguities that we're dealing with, and I place this at point 2. The next term is the triad, and the triad has 3 terms, as the name implies, and it's composed of an initiating force, an opposing force, and a reconciling force. I call this principles and standards. We're dealing now with both and. These are the rules and ground rules that we want to use together, like sharing information, helping each other, listening to each other, apologizing for mistakes. These are the kind of things we agree to do to work together. And we can then use this way of working together, and these become the reconciling force between the issues that we identified at point 2. All 3 of these can come together in 6 different ways, which Bennett named expansion, interaction, concentration, identity, order, and freedom. As we dig into this, it gets more and more complex, and I found that we really don't need to go into that level of depth to use these ideas around the Process Enneagram figure. And it's sufficient for us to say, these are the principles and standards by which we're going to work together in order to fulfill our intention. The next term is the tetrad. And it has to do with the ground. Where are we starting? And the goal, where are we going? It deals with the instrument. This is all the technology and information and whatnot that we bring to bear. And this is the direction in which we're moving. And Bennett called this activity, and I call it work. This is what we're doing to make something happen. This term becomes even more complex than the triad. And I'll show some examples here. So I look at the tetrad here from the ground to the goal, and the instrument to the direction. And the line connecting instrument direction has to do with the operations, the activities in which we engage to make something happen. The motivational line is a vertical line from ground to goal. So the motivation has to be high, and then we bring things into action and move. But all the points are connected. So we go from the need at the ground to doing the job to serve the greater good. That's our goal. Our instrument is the techniques and skills that we bring to bear. And the direction is doing the job for its own sake. So we move along the operational line, bringing our skills and techniques together to work and solve a problem. And we move from the ground to the goal to get things really done and serve the greater good. Now, each of the lines connecting the points have attributes. The line connecting ground and instrument really has to deal with the economic use of the materials that we have at hand. Are we doing things wisely? Are we using our resources wisely? The line connecting direction and goal has to deal with balance. Are the jobs we're doing focused at and in harmony with moving us toward our goal? The line connecting ground and direction has to deal with governance. How do we keep track? What are the metrics that we're using? And the line connecting instrument and goal has to do with the integrity that we bring to bear. So if we take a look at this and go more deeply, looking at what I call the engagement diamond and how work gets done, we go from our ground to the goal, and instrument to direction. We have the ground being the prioritized tasks that we've identified at point 8 as we're working on the process Enneagram. Our goal is to develop partner-centered leadership, doing tasks in self-organized teams. And we bring together our talking, listening, thinking, learning, using the principles and standards, and we work towards self-organizing and solving the problems and co-creating the future. Our motivational line has to do with sensing and openness about what's going on. Our operational line has to do with synthesizing and emergence. So we bring ideas together, we synthesize them, new things emerge. The line connecting ground and instrument do the things that we're looking at look okay? Do they sound right? Is there authenticity? Do we have adequate use of our resources? Are we keeping things in balance as we look at the line from direction to goal? And how are we measuring as we look at the line from ground to direction? And when we look at the instrument, the line from instrument to goal, is it psychologically safe? Are we telling the truth? So you can see when we talk about having people engaged and partnering, there's a whole lot to it that we have to be mindful of. We just can't go and say it and expect it to happen. There's a lot that needs to be done to work on this, to bring it to fruition, and to make it really, really happen. Now the next term to look at is the pentad. It's a 5-term system. And Bennett called this one learning. So I just used that same name, learning, and potential. I added potential to it. And it becomes much more complex to look at. And as I said earlier, each term becomes more and more complex as we go up the line. And so we use this tool to look at our Center for Self-Organizing Leadership a number of years ago, back in 2003, to see what we could learn about our center and what new learning and potential would come from it. And so we spent a day together being guided by Andrew Moyer. And there were 5 or 6 of us working on this. And it was a hard, long day as we tried to think through all the different dimensions that are shown here. It's the only time I've ever used it. I don't feel the need to go into this depth in order to use the process Enneagram. But this does illustrate the complexity that occurs as we go to higher and higher terms. The next term is the hexad. It has 6 terms in this one. And you can see it's 6 triads that are brought together to form this pattern. And Bennett called this structure. I just expanded that a little bit. Structure is the internal structure, and context is the structure of the environment in which we're living or working. I just call that structure and context. So here's the Enneagram again. This is what we started with. Couldn't understand the figure, and we're trying to figure it out. And then we began to realize that maybe if we put Bennett's systems around the Enneagram, we could discover something new and useful. So here's the circle for the Enneagram, and here are the figures that are shown around it. It points 1, the monad, the triad at point 4, the dyad at point 2, relationships at point 3, the hexad at point 8, the tetrad at point 5, the pentad at point 7, and information at point 6. The process we use as we move through doing the work, as we move from the monad to the triad, to the dyad, to the hexad, to the tetrad, to the pentad, and back to the monad. So you can see as we follow the sequence through, we move from higher to lower to higher levels of thinking at each point as we move along. So the system is dynamic and is flowing all the time. And then we have this inner pattern of 0, 3, and 6. And here's the figure again. We're showing the names with the identity. Intention is the monad. Principles and standards is the triad. Issues and ambiguities are the dyad. Relationship is at point 3. The context and structure are the hexad. Work is the tetrad. And learning potential is the pentad. And then we have information. So you can see that where I was able to develop the names using Bennett's systems for points 2, 1, 2, 4, 5, and 7, and 8. The names for the points 0, 3, and 6 came from an entirely different source, and that came out of a workshop with Meg Wheatley, in which a group of us were talking about what are the conditions required for self-organization. And this was back in 1992. And after 3 days of talking together, we concluded that for groups to self-organize, they needed to have a common body of information that they shared and understood. They had to have a consistent set of relationships among themselves where they could have some trust and interdependence. And they had to know how they fitted in, who they were, what was their identity. And so this fit with a lot of Bennett's thinking, but in a little bit different way. Bennett talked about identity as function and relationship as being and information as will. These relate to those. Our function is really our identity. Who are we? A functioning capability is what he talked about at point 1, or point 0. At point 3, he talked about our state of being, and I figured our relationships are how our state of being shows up. So I said relationship. And will was at point 6. And that's not the will to act, it's the decision to act. It's not the action itself. And I put information there because the more information we have, the more able we are to decide what to do and to act. So that's where the names came from for the points. Bennett's systematics, Margaret Wheatley's work on self-organizing systems. And as you remember, we connect intention to principles and standards, to issues, to structure, to the work, to the learning, and back. And then we have this other process running of identity, relationship, and intention, information. So look at this McDonald's example and see how these things fit together to develop a real-world situation. Here's our identity, intention, and principles and standards, and issues and ambiguities, and the relationships. And the relationships emerge out of our working with our principles and standards on the issues and ambiguities that we have before us. This is the context and the structure, and the work, and the learning and potential, and the information that comes out as we talk together about this and what we're learning and what we're doing. So for our high-quality McDonald's, people will know it's the McDonald's from the Golden Arches. It's a fast food, and we're going to have a great team of people together. Our intention is to sell fast food, make a profit, be the best fast food place in town, and we're going to have a small scholarship program for the workers to help them advance their educational aspirations. And then we're going to move to deciding what our principles and standards are together. And we co-create these ideas because we want to be the best fast food place in town. So our service must be consistent with a high-cost customer focus and clean restrooms. We're a team. We listen. We help each other. We share information. And we do those things together. And then we use these things to work on our principles, our issues and ambiguities. And we apply these principles and standards to the challenges. And we're going to have a clean, high-quality food store, the best in town. And as we're working this way, our relationships will develop. We're going to have more trust and interdependence. We'll be a team, more customer-focused. And we're going to work together with team-based organization, with a supportive manager. We're working in an outside environment that's highly competitive and tough. The work that we're going to do is making fast food and keeping the place clean. We're going to have team meetings and training and work together to learn together to get better and better. And we're going to create information and share it widely together. And then we're going to take what we've learned and keep doing it again and again. And we're going to be supported in the self-organizing leadership process of sharing information, building relationships, and creating meaning. So you can see that taking the Enneagram with just the numbers and moving it into a much richer figure by placing the names around it opened this tool up so it's accessible to all of us to use to help our organizations get better and better. Whenever we use the process Enneagram, we begin with an opening question. What's the burning question? What is the most important question the group of people have that we'll be working with? We step into the system with them and engage with them and look at that question from these 9 perspectives. So in conclusion about the points, that the nature of the systems is powerful. Applying the systems to the problem of understanding ourselves and the world is helpful. The names I've given to the various points are useful, simple, and all that's needed to apply and use the concepts. The progression from point to point gets successively more complex, and we move from one activity to the next up and down among the systems, so that it's a very dynamic interplay of how the systems come together. And it's critical, though, to follow the sequence in doing the workshops, since skipping steps leads to gaps and confusion. So we need to follow the sequence 1428571 and support it by sharing information and building relationships of trust and helping people find meaning. Now, there's a lot to Bennett's work, and I'm still learning. But what I've shared with you is enough for you to be able to do highly effective Process Enneagram workshops. Now I want to shift over and talk about the nature of the lines and why these are so important. Each line has meaning and a special characteristic. I want to first look at the lines of the self-organizing process that connects points 0, 3, 6, and back to 9. And I'll show how these relate to Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, showing that there are a number of people who have been thinking about these things, and there seems to be some coming together of the ideas. I'll then take a look at the lines of the process of how work gets done, following the sequence 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, and back to 1. Then I'll show the connection of the characteristics of the lines to the sustainability ratios I talked about in an earlier module. So here's the natural process of self-organization: information, sharing information, getting feedback, building relationships of trust and interdependence, and helping people find who they are and meaning in their work. So sharing information abundantly with respect and integrity builds trust. Helping people to see the importance of their work for the success of the whole builds meaning. These create the psychologically safe conditions where people can self-organize and do their work and do it effectively. It's important to realize that with courage, care, concern, and commitment, sharing information, relationships, and identity can transform can transform when we look at lines 0 to 3 with openness and receptivity, and along that line is the emergence of meaning. Along the line from 3 to 6, we're connecting authenticity, and we have the emergence of trust. And from 6 back to 9, we're unlocking energy and creativity, and action is emerging. So as we work together with care, concern, commitment, and courage, sharing information, building relationships of trust and interdependence, and helping people find meaning in how they fit in, we release meaning, trust, and action, and that's where organizations really take off. And when we take a look at Joseph Campbell's work, where he talked about the hero's journey about 20 years ago, leaving along the line 0 to 3, you're leaving home for a new place. You're going from who you are now and adventuring out to a new place, meeting new people, establishing new relationships, new ideas. As you stay at that point, you begin to then think about moving across and doing things from 3 to 6. And when you start to begin to operate out of your new self, things change and you can't go back. And then the line from 6 to 9 was returning home as the new self. And this is the hero's journey that Campbell talked about. And it's interesting how closely it relates to the self-organizing leadership process we've been talking about. Now I want to talk about the natural process by which work gets done, and talk the nature of the lines from 1 to 4, 4 to 2, 2 to 8, 8 to 5, 5 to 7, and 7 back to 1. This was developed by Claire, my wife, me, Frank Schmitz, Dave Cash, and Barry Stevenson back in 2003 in a workshop we were having for our Center for Self-Organizing Leadership. And what we discovered as we talked about the lines was that as we move from 1 to 4, we're invoking our values. Our intention has to be important to us. That's something we really want to have happen. And we begin to invoke our values about how to do this and how to make it work safely. And we begin to move forward. And we develop our principles and standards. Our values show up by the agreements that we make together of sharing information, being respectful, listening, helping, apologizing for mistakes. And as we move from 4 to 2, we are applying these values to work on the issues and ambiguities that we identified. And we're not going to go and settle for compromise. We're going to work towards reconciliation. And then we move from 2 to 8. And as we do this work, we begin to visualize new ways in which we can organize ourselves to do the work. And new structures begin to emerge, like ad hoc teams or something. And as we go from 8 to 5, we're actually beginning to apply that structures, those new structures and roles to how we're doing work. And then when we move from 5 to 7, we are trying to understand how that happened and how we can do it better and what's going on and what have we learned and what new potential is there. And when we move from 7 back to 1, we're integrating what we've learned back into the new whole for the next cycle. So each of these lines has important meaning for us. Now this shows the same figure that I had on the previous chart. But after we spent the day working on that night I woke up and realized there was a very strong relationship between the way we identified the lines and the sustainability ratios that I developed several years earlier. So as we're invoking our values, the ratio is we're sensing the environment and the pressure to change. We're in relationship with our immediate environment and in this process invoke our values as we judge what we're sensing. And what we're sensing become the principles and standards. So from 4 to 2, we're applying our values. We're deciding how to change and the impact. And we apply the values that we engage, the principles and standards, to the issues that we need to change. And from 2 to 8, we're visualizing roles and emergent structures. And ratio 1 is the formation of structure. We visualize and create the structures we feel are most appropriate as we engage the issues. Moving from 8 to 5, evoking and adapting the roles and structures relates to ratio 2, the system's identity and the sense of itself. We're moving in the structure to engage the work with flexible roles, which are critical for our success. And we move from 5 to 7, investigating what's happening, how we're learning, what is the past. And we're learning and our ability to adapt. We engage the living past, present, and future, and ourself reflecting and remembering. And as we move from 7 to 1, integrating the new whole, ratio 6, being open to and acting on new possibilities and potentialities. So I was quite fascinated with the interrelationship of the lines that we identified in May of 2003 with the sustainability ratios, which I developed back at about 1998. So in conclusion, about the lines. By keeping the nature of the lines in mind, as we use the process Enneagram, we support and maintain the integrity of the whole process. The natural process of self-organization is 0, 3, 6, and back to 9. The connection with Campbell's hero's journey shows the great depth of the patterns and that there's a number of thoughtful people moving towards these ideas of this triad. The natural process by which work gets done is 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, and back to 1. And this connects with the sustainability ratio, showing that keeping the nature of the lines in mind builds sustainability into the work. Keeping the nature of the points and the lines in mind as we lead a process Enneagram workshop gives us a deep level of confidence in the power and authenticity of this work. So we've come through a great deal of complexity and systematics through these modules, but we come out here at the end with a very simple, powerful tool that's easy to use. It's understandable by people at all educational levels, and always works when we have people who have a serious question and are willing to sit together and talk and listen and learn. Thank you very much. Good going in your work as you move ahead. Bye-bye.